Hi folks, in today's video we're going to talk about an alternative to the alignment system. I've never been a huge fan of D&D's classic alignment system. You know the one I'm talking about, where law and chaos are on one axis and good and evil on the other. One of the reasons I don't like it is it's a bit too nebulous and often leads to more cartoonish characters or roleplay. But there are some classes that require a code of ethics for mechanics, like clerics and paladins, and it can be incredibly helpful for roleplay to have an idea of what your character's moral code is. This is where edicts and anathemas, or always and never statements, can come into play as an alternative to the alignment system. So I first came across this idea while looking it through Pathfinder's remastered 2nd edition core book. You can check out my review up here. And there I found what they call edicts and anathemas. But I realized it's actually something I've done unconsciously for a number of years with my characters by having kind of always and never statements to help guide my character's moral code. Now, edicts or always statements are things my character will always do, or at least attempt. I will always help a friend in need. I will always make a contract to my advantage. They don't have to be good things that your character will always do, just things your character will always do. Anathemas are the opposite, actions that would violate your own moral code or your society or deity's moral code. And these can fall anywhere on the alignment chart, whether good, evil, lawful, or even chaotic. Okay, so here are a few examples from Pathfinder to give you an idea. So an edict of Asmodeus would be to negotiate contracts to your advantage, and an Asmodeus anathema would be to break a contract. You might have an edict to protect nature and have an anathema to create undead. You might have an edict that you will always negotiate contracts to your advantage and say that I will never break a contract. You have an edict to fight for justice and an anathema to abandon a companion in need. Or maybe you will always keep your true identity secret and will never share a secret freely. There can be a wide range to these edicts and anathemas or always never statements. Before I get too much further, I want to take a moment to thank all of our patrons, especially Marty. If you want to help support what we do, head on over to our Patreon page and check out the perks of being a patron. So where does this moral code come from, and does every character need it? Well, for some classes and characters, it might be defined by their deity. In Pathfinder, all of the gods have a couple of edicts and anathema listed. Your character could follow all of them, or perhaps they personally follow only a few of them. Now, depending on your class, you might be required to follow all of them. It's also suggested that your ancestry or, the society you grew up in might inform your code of conduct. Or you may have an entirely personal moral code. I like that in Pathfinder, clerics and champions have edicts and anathemas attached to their character mechanics. But they also highly recommend druids and barbarians have some as well. With druids, protecting nature as an edict. And barbarians may have something tied to their path, they'll never turn down a test of strength. And look, your character's moral code can change. This might be due to a slow character progression and you kind of decide to switch up a few of their codes when you find they aren't fitting, especially if it's not tied to mechanics. Or it might be in response to an extreme moment that pushed your character to go against an edict or an anathema. I think it actually helps codify the line for characters whose abilities are tied to a code to tell when those moments are that you've crossed the line and now there's going to be some kind of consequence so that GMs can kind of be like, hey, the deity you follow, this was their anathema and you did it. Okay, now you're going to lose access to this ability until you've kind of made up or made amends with your god. One of the characters that kind of first came to mind when I was reading this was my Shadowrun character, Tala. She wasn't a good person. She wasn't a moral person, but she did have her own moral code. And one of the things kind of on that code that I came up with was that she wouldn't pull the trigger. She was okay having a hand in, somebody's life coming to an end, just as long as she wasn't directly responsible. If she could rationalize that I didn't pull the trigger, so to speak, she was okay with it. So when an innocent friend of hers died as a direct result of something, one of her actions, that had a huge impact on her. And I kind of, played her a little differently as she was processing and kind of reassessing that moral code, essentially. Additionally, I think this system can be so useful if you are homebrewing gods and religions. You can figure out what that god represents or the values that they have, and then come up with a handful of always and never statements that act as a guidance on how their followers behave. Again, this is going to work for a deity of any alignment, and it's going to help differentiate two gods that might both technically, let's say, be lawful good, but have different values within that alignment. Plus, I also think it can lead to much more interesting characters and deities, as you can have elements that would make sense to that group based on like what their values are or what they represent, but that may not all kind of align within the like lawful good or neutral evil parts of the alignment, because nobody is ever like fully good or fully evil or fully lawful or fully chaotic. Like, we all kind of exist somewhere on the alignment chart, more in the center and rather at the like super extremes. So you might have moral codes that kind of don't fall all into one alignment. Additionally, I think this might also help avoid the accidental asshole chaotic characters. Look, you can still have a chaotic character who enjoys disrupting societal norms, who doesn't follow societal law, but acts on their own moral compass, and just come up with their own code. Or if you're playing a character that just doesn't have a moral code, you don't have to have these always never statements, but I think they can be super useful because I think everybody has kind of some sense of moral code, or at least how they envision themselves, and that can kind of translate to some of these always and never statements. So what do you think? Are you a fan of the traditional D&D alignment and would never use this system? Are you already using this concept with your characters, or do you think you'll use it in the future? Let's chat about it more in comments below. Or do you have a completely different alternative to the alignment system? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye!